Most people believe that trust is something you earn slowly over time. They think that if someone is nice to you, remembers your birthday, and listens to your problems, they're trustworthy. But here's the disturbing truth. Some of the most dangerous people in your life are often the kindest ones. Nietzsche understood something that most people miss. He said that we don't hate our enemies, we hate those we've betrayed in our own minds. And nowhere is this more visible than in the relationships we maintain with people who slowly, almost imperceptibly, erode our sense of self. The problem isn't recognizing bad people. Bad people are obvious. They're rude. They're hostile. You avoid them naturally. The problem is recognizing the people who seem good, but aren't. The ones who wear the mask of friendship while slowly poisoning your psychology. The ones who smile while they undermine you. The ones who claim to care while they manipulate you. Most people never develop this awareness. They spend decades wondering why certain relationships feel draining, why certain friends seem jealous of their success, why certain family members seem to sabotage them at crucial moments. This is what this video is about. We're going to uncover 6 psychological archetypes, 6 types of people whose presence in your life is far more dangerous than any obvious enemy. And more importantly, we're going to reveal what these types reveal about human nature itself. By the end of this video, you'll be able to identify these people instantly. And you'll understand something most people never do, that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. Let's begin. Before we move on, take a quick second to subscribe to the channel. It will only take a moment of your time, but it will help me tremendously. Number 1, the chameleon, the person with no self. There's a particular kind of person who seems to be exactly like you. They like your music. They agree with your opinions. They laugh at your jokes the way you want to be laughed at. They mirror your values, your dreams, your ambitions. And then, somehow, they're no longer in your life. Or if they are, you realize something unsettling. You have no idea who they actually are. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear for the world. But the chameleon doesn't just wear a mask. The chameleon has no face underneath it. Here's what most people get wrong. They think the chameleon is dishonest. They think the chameleon is deceiving you. But that's not quite right. The chameleon has likely deceived themselves first. They have abandoned their own identity so thoroughly that they've become a living reflection of whoever is in front of them. This is far more dangerous than dishonesty, because dishonesty can be confronted. But how do you confront someone who doesn't have a solid position to argue against? How do you build a real relationship with someone who is merely reflecting you back to yourself? The chameleon makes you feel deeply understood. That feeling is intoxicating. But it's a trap. Because the moment you need them to be themselves, to have their own perspective, their own boundaries, their own reality, they disappear. Or worse, they turn on you. Because they were never actually with you. They were just borrowing your identity. You'll recognize them in your life. The friend who always agrees with you. The colleague who becomes eerily similar to you after a few months of friendship. The romantic partner who seems to want exactly what you want until suddenly, inexplicably, they don't. The psychological truth is this: the chameleon is running from their own shadow. They are terrified of being seen for who they actually are, so they've learned to be whoever others need them to be. It's a survival mechanism born in trauma, often in families where their true self was never accepted. But here's what you must understand. You cannot help them find themselves. That's not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to notice when someone has no stable self, and to recognize that a relationship without mutual authenticity is just mutual deception. The insight, real connection, requires both people to show up as themselves. If someone is always the person you need them to be, They are not a friend. They are a mirror. And mirrors cannot love you back. Number 2, the chronic competitor, the person who sees your win as their loss theirs, a particular pain that comes from the people who should celebrate you, but don't. Your sibling gets quiet when you announce your promotion. Your friend takes longer to respond when you tell them about your relationship. Your colleague seems distant after your project succeeds. They congratulate you, but their eyes tell a different story. Most people interpret this as jealousy, and yes, it is, but it's a specific kind of jealousy that reveals something dangerous about how that person relates to the world. The chronic competitor doesn't just want to succeed. They need you to fail relative to them. Your success diminishes them in their own mind. This isn't because they're evil. It's because they've constructed their entire sense of self on being better than. Not better at something. Better than people. This comes from a deep, often unconscious belief. If you are rising, I am falling. If you are winning, I am losing. The world is a zero-sum game, and your gains are literally my losses. Nietzsche understood this mentality. He called it resentment, a deep-seated resentment that lives in people who believe they've been cheated by life. The chronic competitor doesn't celebrate you because your success is a reminder that they're not special. They're not the chosen one. They're just ordinary, just like everyone else. So watch what happens. They will subtly undermine you. Not overtly. Not with cruelty, but with small comments. You're so lucky. That promotion was probably due to connections. You've had it easy. These aren't compliments wrapped in doubt. They're volleys in a war you didn't know you were fighting. The insidious part is that they'll do this while maintaining the facade of friendship. They need you in their life, because if you're in their life, they can keep measuring themselves against you. As long as they're close to you, they can convince themselves that the gap between you isn't real, or that it will close eventually. But eventually, it often doesn't. And then comes the moment where their resentment spills over. Maybe they betray a confidence. Maybe they support someone else against you at a crucial moment. Maybe they simply disappear when you need them most. The pattern is always the same. When your success becomes undeniable, they can no longer afford to be your friend. The psychological truth is that chronic competitors are deeply insecure. Not about this or that about their fundamental worth. They have never developed an internal sense of value. They only feel valuable in relation to others being less valuable than them. This is a lifelong condition. You cannot cure it with kindness or achievement. In fact, the more successful you become, the more dangerous they become. The insight: anyone who requires your failure to feel good about themselves cannot be your friend. Period. Protect your victories from them. Don't confide your ambitions to them. And when you recognize this pattern, accept what it means. This person does not have your back. They have their back, and you just happen to be a reflection in their mirror. Number 3, the wounded healer, the person who projects their trauma onto you. There's a type of person who draws you in with their vulnerability. They tell you things they haven't told anyone else. They make you feel special by confiding in you. They need you in a way that makes you feel needed. And then, slowly, you realize they're not healing. They're recruiting. The wounded healer is someone who has been hurt, genuinely hurt, but instead of facing that pain, they've learned to weaponize it. They've convinced themselves that if they can just heal you, save you, or make you understand their pain, then their pain will finally mean something. This is a particular kind of psychological trap, because on the surface, it looks like intimacy. Vulnerability, trust, but it's actually a form of control dressed up in the language of healing. Jung understood archetypes deeply. The wounded healer is the archetype of someone who wants to heal others precisely because they cannot heal themselves. Their helpfulness is actually helplessness. Their advice is a projection of their own unresolved trauma. Watch what happens in these relationships. You start out being their confidant, but gradually, you start to become responsible for their emotional regulation. Your role shifts from friend to therapist, from equal to caretaker. And if you ever try to set a boundary, if you ever say, "I can't keep carrying this," they break. They feel abandoned. They feel betrayed. This is because your role was never to be their friend. Your role was to validate their narrative that they are good people who have been wronged, and that their suffering is noble and meaningful. It's exhausting. Because the wounded healer's pain is real, but the way they process it is through you. They don't process it through therapy, through self-reflection, through genuine work. They process it by making you understand their pain, by making you complicit in their story. The most dangerous version of the wounded healer is the one who disguises control as care. "I'm telling you this because I care about you. I'm worried about you. I'm just trying to help." But what they're actually doing is slowly isolating you from perspective, inserting themselves as the voice of truth in your life, making you dependent on their validation. The psychological truth is that the wounded healer is using you to avoid facing their own shadow. They want to be the helper, because being helped, actually receiving care, being vulnerable to someone else, admitting they can't fix themselves, is terrifying to them. The insight: be very careful with people whose primary way of relating to you is through their trauma. Compassion is important. But there's a difference between hearing someone's pain and becoming responsible for healing it. If someone's primary function in your life is to tell you their problems while making you feel like you're the problem, they are not your friend. They are your patient. And you didn't sign up to be a therapist. Number 4, the status climber, the person who befriends you for your position. This one is subtle, almost invisible, because the status climber is often charming, attentive, and genuinely seems to care about you. Until your status changes, you lose your job, your business fails, your social circle shrinks. Suddenly, the status climber becomes busy. They don't call as often. They're not quite as warm. It's nothing you can put your finger on. It's just different. Or the opposite happens. Someone new enters your life, and suddenly the status climber is very interested in introducing themselves to that person. They want to be close to the new source of status, and you become the convenient introduction. Most people call this false friendship. But it's more specific than that. The status climber isn't being false. They're being transactional. And there's a difference. A false friend is lying about their feelings. A transactional person doesn't experience friendship as a category at all. They experience relationships as networks, connections, resources. You are valuable to them not as a person, but as a node in their social graph. Marcus Aurelius wrote extensively about this. He understood that some people will never see you as a person. They will only see you as a function, as a tool, as a means to their end. The status climber learned early that the world operates on status and connection, so they've optimized their life around maintaining and climbing status. They're not malicious about it. They're just clear-eyed about power in a way most people are not. The problem is that you are not clear-eyed about it. You assume that if someone is treating you well, they like you. But they like what you represent. The moment your representation changes, so does their behavior. Watch for the patterns. Do they seek you out more when you're doing well? Do they introduce you to people who are more successful than you? Do they take credit for introductions they make? Do they suddenly have less time for you when you're struggling? The status climber doesn't even feel guilty about this, because in their mind, they're not doing anything wrong. They're just maximizing their position in the social hierarchy. That's what everyone's doing, they'd say. You're just pretending not to. The psychological truth is that the status climber has internalized a scarcity mentality. They believe there are only so many spots at the top, and everyone is fighting for them. So they fight, too. They've just learned to do it with a smile. The insight. Anyone who is more interested in who you know than how you are is not your friend. They're your business connection. Treat them as such. Don't confide in them. Don't depend on them. Don't be surprised when they disappear. And most importantly, don't feel hurt by it. They're playing a game. You don't have to be a pawn in it. Number 5. The victim perpetual, the person whose drama is never ending. There's a particular person who always has a crisis. Always. The moment one is resolved, another emerges. The job is terrible, so they're going to leave, but they can't because of this issue, and that issue, and everyone at work is against them. Then the relationship is the problem. Then the family. Then their health. Then their finances. And you're there, listening, supporting, advising, caring, and nothing ever changes. Most people interpret this as bad luck. They think this person just has a hard life. But there's something darker happening here. The victim perpetual is not helpless. They are invested in remaining helpless. Because in their mind, helplessness is safety. If you're the victim, you can never be blamed. If you're struggling, people have to be nice to you. If you're drowning, you get to pull people down with you. And they can't be angry about it because you're drowning. This is a learned strategy. Often it comes from childhood, from a family system, where attention, love, and care only came when there was a crisis. So the victim perpetual learned to create crises. It's the only language they know for asking for help. But here's the dark truth. The victim perpetual is not just helpless. They are helplessness. They have made themselves synonymous with struggle, and they cannot let go of that identity without facing the void beneath it. So they manufacture drama. Unconsciously, maybe, but they manufacture it, and they need you to validate the drama. They need you to confirm that yes, they are indeed the victim, and no, there's nothing they could have done differently, and yes, the world is unfair to them. The problem is that their need for validation is infinite. You can listen forever, and it will never be enough. You can validate forever, and they will never change. Because the moment you step back and suggest that maybe, just maybe, they have some agency in their situation, they feel betrayed. They feel like you don't understand them. You become the villain in their story. Nietzsche called this the slave mentality. The person who has become so invested in their oppression that freedom would destroy their identity. The victim perpetual doesn't want to be saved. They want to be pitied. The psychological truth is that the victim perpetual is terrified of responsibility. Because if they're not a victim, then they're accountable, and accountability means they could have done things differently, and that's a weight they cannot bear. The insight, compassion for someone suffering is important. But there's a line between compassion and complicity. If someone is repeatedly creating the same crisis and then looking to you to solve it, they're not your friend. They're your mirror. They're showing you that you have poor boundaries. Don't confuse their pain with your responsibility. You cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Number 6. The emotionally unavailable controller, the person who loves you through dominance. This is perhaps the most insidious type, because it wears the mask of strength. The emotionally unavailable controller is someone who cares about you, maybe even loves you. But they can only show it through control. They tell you what to do. They monitor your choices. They manage your emotions. And if you ever assert yourself, if you ever dare to make a decision they didn't approve, they withdraw. They go cold. They become unreachable. And so you learn over time to stop making decisions. You learn to ask their permission. You learn to manage yourself to keep them emotionally available. Because the moments when they're warm, present, and engaged are so intoxicating that you'll do almost anything to maintain them. Most people call this codependency. And it is. But it's worth understanding the psychology of the person doing the controlling. The emotionally unavailable controller learned early that feelings are weakness, that vulnerability is dangerous. So they never developed the capacity to be truly intimate. Instead, they learned to dominate, to control, to maintain distance while appearing to be close. They say they love you, and maybe, in their way, they do. But their love is conditional on you being manageable, on you being someone they can understand and direct. The moment you become unpredictable, they panic, and they tighten the grip. Watch for the patterns. Do they criticize your other friendships? Do they have an opinion about what you wear, how you spend money, who you see? Do they withdraw affection when you disagree with them? Do they use silence as punishment? Do they claim to be helping you when really they're controlling you? The Stoics understood something about this. Marcus Aurelius wrote about the importance of focusing on what's in your control and releasing what isn't. The emotionally unavailable controller has done the opposite. They're obsessed with controlling what isn't theirs to control. They can't control their own emotions, so they control yours instead. The psychological truth is that the emotionally unavailable controller is deeply afraid. Afraid of abandonment, afraid of irrelevance, afraid of a world where they don't matter. So they make themselves indispensable through control. The insight, love should never require you to diminish yourself. If someone truly loves you, they want you to become more yourself, not less. If someone is controlling you while claiming to love you, they don't love you. They love the version of you that they can manage. And that's not love. That's possession. The psychology behind this, why do these people exist? Why are they so common? The answer is buried deep in human psychology. It comes down to fear. Every single one of these archetypes, the chameleon, the chronic competitor, the wounded healer, the status climber, the victim perpetual, the emotionally unavailable controller, they're all operating from a place of fundamental fear. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of being unworthy. Fear of being invisible. Fear of being alone. In a world where status is everything, where your worth is determined by your achievement, where love is transactional and relationships are networks, these psychological adaptations start to make sense. These people aren't broken. They're perfectly adapted to a broken system. The chameleon is afraid that the real them is unlovable, so they've learned to be whoever you need. The chronic competitor is afraid that they're not special, so they've learned to measure themselves against others. The wounded healer is afraid of their own emptiness, so they've learned to make their pain meaningful through others. The status climber is afraid of irrelevance, so they've learned to collect connections like currency. The victim perpetual is afraid of responsibility, so they've learned to abdicate agency. The emotionally unavailable controller is afraid of abandonment, so they've learned to make themselves indispensable through dominance. These aren't moral failures. These are psychological strategies, survival mechanisms. The problem is that they don't actually lead to survival. They lead to a life of exhaustion, disconnection, and emotional bankruptcy. And if you're susceptible to these people, if you keep finding yourself in relationships with them, it's worth asking yourself, what are you afraid of? How to respond? You've identified these types. What do? First, create distance. Not hostility, not drama, just distance. Reduce the frequency of contact. Reduce the depth of sharing. Treat the relationship as it actually is, not as you wish it to be. Second, stop over-explaining yourself. People like this will twist your words anyway. You don't owe them clarity. You don't owe them understanding. You don't owe them anything. Third, establish firm boundaries, not as a punishment, but as a necessity. Your energy is finite. Protect it like you'd protect your money. Invest it in people who reciprocate, who are genuine, who actually see you. Fourth, stop seeking their validation. This is the hardest one, because you've been trained to need it. But validation from someone who doesn't truly know you is worthless. It's like asking a blind person what color you're wearing. Fifth, focus on your own mission. This is the real antidote. When you have a clear sense of purpose, when you're building something larger than yourself, these people become irrelevant. They have no leverage over you, because you're no longer seeking approval. You're seeking excellence. Why this matters now: we live in an age where everything is curated, where everyone has a personal brand, where relationships are often initiated through screens and maintained through transactions. Social media has weaponized the tactics that these 6 types use. The chameleon has become the influencer, carefully crafting a persona for each audience. The status climber has turned networking into an art form, collecting followers like their currency. The victim perpetual has found a platform where their suffering can be endlessly validated. The emotionally unavailable controller has learned to use algorithms to keep you coming back. We're more connected than ever. And more lonely, more validated, and more insecure. And the people who thrive in this environment are often the ones with poor boundaries, poor emotional intelligence, and deep psychological wounds that they've learned to hide behind charisma. So now, more than ever, the ability to recognize these types is a superpower. Most people are stumbling through life being affected by these dynamics without even knowing it. They're wondering why they feel drained, why certain relationships don't work, why they keep repeating the same patterns. The answer is that they never developed the discernment to identify what's actually happening. You're different. By the end of this video, you have that discernment. The powerful ending here's what the ancient Stoics understood. You cannot control other people. You cannot make them be better. You cannot fix them. You cannot love them into wholeness. What you can do is this. You can choose who you let into your inner circle. You can decide whose voice gets access to your mind. You can protect your energy like the finite resource it is. Nietzsche wrote, "In individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs it is the rule." The people we're talking about aren't insane. They're just playing by rules that everyone's taught to play by. The rules of fear, status, and self-protection. But you don't have to play by those rules. Not with everyone. Not always. The people worth having in your life are the ones who are doing their own work. The ones who have faced their shadow. The ones who can be genuinely themselves because they're not terrified of being rejected for it. The ones who celebrate your wins without keeping score. The ones who support you not because they need you, but because they respect you. These people are rare, but they're not impossible to find. And they're worth waiting for. So here's what you do. You use this awareness not as a weapon against others, but as a shield for yourself. You let people show you who they are, and you believe them. You listen to your intuition, that quiet voice that knows when something is off. You prioritize peace over approval. And you build your life around people who make you want to be better, not just people who make you feel better. Because in the end, the only person you can ever really trust is the one you're becoming. And that person, the one who can see clearly, who can set boundaries firmly, who can love without losing themselves, that person is becoming rare and precious in a world full of noise and deception. Be that person. Become that person. Everything else will follow.